to chapter 5, verse 19. We just finished the 10 Commandments, and it says in chapter 5, verse 19, oh Moshe, these words Hashem commanded. It said, these words Hashem commanded, speaking, Hashem el kol kalchem bahar mitoch ha'esh. These words Hashem spoke amongst the community in the mountain from the fire, mitoch ha'esh, anan varafel, kol gadol v'ul yasaf. So these words Hashem spoke to your whole community at the mountain from the fire, the cloud and the darkness, a large sound, and v'ul yasaf, and he did not stop. And God inscribed them on 2 stone tablets and gave them to me. Rashi says, which did not stop. Because Rashi explains, it's the way of flesh and blood that they're unable to speak all of their words in a single breath. And the way of God is not so. God will not stop for breath. And since he will not stop, he did not add additional statements. His voice is strong and lasts forever. So basically, God's voice just continued. Alternatively, it means he did not continue to appear in such a public setting. This was the only time that there was the revelation, and that was it. This was the last time in history that God appeared to everybody in public. It was just this time and not again. This was the last time. So then it says, when he heard your voice from amidst the darkness, and the mountain was burning in fire, and all of you approached me. So who's speaking? Moshe is speaking here. And you said, by the way, I feel like I know I said this so many times, but I was able to be at that spot. This last place in human history where God revealed himself to everybody. I was there. I don't think too many people have been there since then.
That's special.
Yeah.
Is that fairly reliable?
Of course. Yeah. I feel it was. I mean, I have a book there, and he writes hundreds of pages proving that location. But just to be sure, I went to 3 different locations. Yeah, so.
I'm pretty sure that place that I was in the Sinai is not the location.
Right, it was pretty much accepted that the Sinai desert itself, which is just called the Sinai later in history, that's not Mount Sinai.
They do a brisk business selling tchotchkes up there on top.
Yeah, well, it's a monastery now.
Yeah.
The place in Saudi Arabia is just deserted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, one of the mountains, there's a big fence around an area adjacent to it. So it strikes me as probably some like military zone. Mm-hmm. But the other one is just completely deserted. And for a long time, they said no trespassing because it was like an artifact. But now what's going on is right near that spot, the first one we went to, what's the guy who runs Saudi Arabia now, MBS or something? He's got a lot of Dubai envy. He's envious of Dubai getting all the attention, the money. So he is building this big city, which is just supposedly, I mean, he's really spending a lot of money, and people aren't sure it's going to work. But if it does work, I think it's called Noam or something. And if it does work, it's right near the Sinai, and then a lot of people will start visiting it. But right now it's pretty remote. Not too many people go there. There's nothing there. Like when you get there, it isn't like a tourist location to go and visit. It's just there. It's just the desert, the wilderness, and we slept outside there for the night.
Wow.
And we did not see anybody.
Wow.
We didn't see a single other person there. It wasn't like you run into other people. So we were there and no one else.
That's perfect.
I mean, as long as nothing goes wrong, it's perfect. Right? We were out there on our own. And it was nice. Yeah, Jerry, you had a question?
Yes. with the first giving of the Ten Commandments, the Jewish people were very frightened, and just the Ani was recited or heard by the people, or not even that. But here we talked about God's continuing talking.
Yeah.
So which is the one correct?
No, God spoke, but people weren't hearing him. That's the point.
Ah, okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, you see, Michael has your site tomorrow night, and tonight he's remembering his dear friend who was really a friend to the Jewish people. I don't know, you boys are probably too young, and you weren't alive when there was the PLO hijacked a cruise ship called the Achille Lauro. And on this cruise ship, there was an elderly couple from New Jersey, and one of the men was in a wheelchair. His name was Leon Klinghoffer. And the PLO took this man in a wheelchair, this Jew, and they threw him over the side of the ship and killed him. And Michael and Barbara's friend represented the Klinghoffer family. But that was just a tremendous tragedy. I remember it must have been around 40 years ago.
During
Reagan.
Oh,
So Reagan was in the 80s. Yeah, it was around 40 years ago. Okay, so
seems like yesterday.
so he said Vatomru, and they said, Hey Neranu Hashem Elokeinu et kvodo v'et kodlo v'et kolo shemanu mitoch ha'esh. They said, God showed us his glory and his honor, and his voice was heard from the fire. Hayom hazeh ra'inu, this day we're seeing Ki daber Elokim et ha'adam v'chai, that God is able to speak to man and live. So that's what we see. Hold on one second.
So they went to the intermediary.
After this, they said it's too much. Okay. So he says, V'ata, lama nomus, why will we die? Ki tochenu ha'esh ha'gedola azot, because when this great fire consumes us. Hold on. Why will you die? Why should we die when this great fire consumes us? And Yosvim anachnu l'shmoa et kol Hashem Elokeinu. If we continue to hear the voice of Hashem our God, still vamasnu, then we will die. Verse 23. Ki mikol basar asher shama kol Elokim chayim midaber mitoch ha'esh kamonu v'yachid. Can any flesh and blood hear God speak and die? Karav ata u'shama et kol asher yimar Hashem Elokeinu. Come close and listen to everything that Hashem is speaking to us. V'at tedaber aleinu et kol asher yidaber Hashem Elokeinu elecha v'shamanu v'asinu. Come close, and you should hear everything that Hashem's, and you should speak to us. So the people are asking Moshe to speak. But here, the interesting thing is that usually when you say the word you in Hebrew, if you're speaking to a man, do you know how you say it? Ata. And if you're speaking to a female, how do you say it? At. But here, they're speaking to Moshe, and it says, Va'at tedaber eleinu. So they're speaking to Moshe using the feminine form. So why is that the case? So Rashi says that that Moshe was saying, Hitashtam et kochi kenekiva, you made me weak like a woman, because I grieved over you, and you loosened my hand, because I saw that you were not anxious to bring yourselves close to him out of love. Wouldn't it not have been better for you to learn from the mouth of God and not to learn from me? So the people said, Moshe was saying that he referred to himself in the feminine, that they spoke to him in the feminine because he said he was upset that they wanted to listen to him and not to God.
They wanted him to be the intermediary.
Well, they were afraid to go to God. It was too much for them. This, by the way, this is still a phenomenon. People are afraid to speak to God directly, so they go to like a great spiritual guru and ask that Rebbe or a spiritual giant to pray on their behalf. Now, there is a value in going to a great tzaddik and asking the tzaddik to pray for you, but there's also an even greater value in you praying yourself and you having the direct relationship with God. So that's almost a shadow of this development, that they didn't want to hear from God directly, and so people were afraid to pray to God directly. So then, Vayishma Hashem et kol divreichem v'daberchem elai, and Hashem heard the sound of your words when you spoke to me. Vayomer Hashem elai, and Hashem said to me, Shamati et kol divrei ha'am hazeh, I heard the sound of the words of this people, asher dibru elecha, that they have spoken to you. Hitivu kol asher diberu. They did well in all that they spoke. Mi yitain vayalav vam zeh lahem liroti. Who can be sure that such shall be this heart of theirs, to fear me and to guard my commandments, l'shmor et kol mitzvotai kol yamim, all the days, aman yitav lahem v'lomnehem l'olam, in order to be good for them and their children forever. So Hashem says that he does not want them, that he's happy with them. He says, but now what you have to say is, lechem morlahem, go to them and tell them, shuvu achem l'alechem, go back to your tents. V'ata po'om amod imadi, now stand with me today. V'adabra elecha, and I will say to you, kol mitzvah v'chukim v'mishpatim asher tulamdim. So basically, what is going on here? You have to see what's going on here. And he's saying, I'm telling you, they're right. They can't hear everything from me. But here, as Jerry pointed out, what are they talking about here? It seems like this is being said after the Ten Commandments. God has appeared in the Ten Commandments, and then the people say to Moshe, we can't do this. We can't hear from God anymore of the commandments. We can't hear them from him. We can only hear them from you. So God said, Moshe was upset about that, but Hashem agreed with them. And he said, okay, tell them to go back. You stay here, and I'll tell you everything. And Moshe is waiting to hear from God. Stand with me, and I'll tell you all these laws and commandments that you should teach them. Now, by the way, I have to stop saying, by the way, I'm like a tick. I got it from one of my kids or whatever. But what is going to be the essence of what God teaches Moshe after he sends everybody home? Well, we're going to get to that in just a few verses. In just a few verses, we're going to get to that. It says in verse 29, Ushmartem la'asot, Kasher tzivah Hashem alkechem eschem, and you shall guard it to do, just like Hashem commanded you. Otasuru yaminu small. Don't, everything I'm going to tell you, don't depart to the right or left. He hasn't said what he's going to tell. And then he says, B'chol derech asher tzivah Hashem alkechem etem, everything that Hashem commands you should go. Aman techyun v'tov lachem, so it'll be good for you and you'll live. V'arachtem yamim ba'aretz asher tirashun, and you'll have a long life. And still he hasn't said what he's going to tell them. They come, they said, Moshe, you tell us. God says, okay, I'll tell you what to tell them. Send them home, I'll tell you what to tell them. This is the mitzvah and the laws and the judgments that Hashem commanded you to study. This is the commandment. Well, what is it? We're waiting. We're still waiting. What is it? You shall fear God, to guard all his commandments. This is the law you shall follow all the days of your life. And I command you, your son and your children, in order that you should have a long life. Still, what is this commandment? We still haven't got to it. Vishamata Yisrael, and Israel will listen to you. Vishamarta Lasot, and you'll guard it to do. Asher Yitav will be good for you. asher tirbun ma'od, and you'll increase a lot. Kasher diber Hashem Elokecha v'techa lach eretz avatcha v'dvash. So all of this is a preamble to the commandment that God said to Moshe. What is the commandment? He has not yet told us what it is. He has said the people came, and then he said, okay, tell us the commandment. You know what the commandment is? The very next verse. The very next verse is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Now all of a sudden we understand why Shema is such a central verse to our faith. That all of a sudden what happened was Hashem, the whole narrative, now we understand it. The 10 Commandments were issued. The God appeared, he revealed himself. The people said, we can't handle it. It's too much for us. So then they went to Moshe, and Moshe said, okay. And God says, okay, send them home. I'll tell you what to tell them. And I'm going to tell you this, and all they have to do is keep this, and that'll be good. They just have to guard this and keep this, it'll be enough. This will be sufficient. This is what you have to do. Just keep this. What is this? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That is the Shema. Shema is the words that God said to Moshe to tell the Jewish people after they said, we can't hear the 10 Commandments anymore. It's the very next thing God says is the Shema. That's straight reading of the narrative. That's not even Rashi. That's just the straight text. And then we go through the Shema, and then there's other commandments, but the very first thing God says, so if anybody says to you, well, what's the next thing God said to Moses after the Shema? After 10 Commandments, that's the Shema. All right, let's stop here. Let us stop in at this time. Yasher koach to everybody.